First Celtics pregame live of the season. Welcome in, everybody. I'm your host, Justin Lowe. Alongside with me, I have Rob, I have Ian, I have a newcomer, Seamus. Celtics every day. How's everybody doing? We're getting set for the Celtics and Knicks season opener at Madison Square Garden. How we doing, fellas?
We're excited, man. Let's go.
I'm so hyped. So hyped.
All right, so first and foremost, I do have to start off the Celtics pregame live. Shutting out our social medias. Follow us on TikTok and Instagram at the Celtics Talk Weekly, on Twitter at Celtics_weekly, and go see our website. We do articles, CelticsTalkWeekly.com, and as well as subscribe on our YouTube here, the Celtics Talk Weekly. Celtics and Knicks, as I said, getting set to tip off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll have you covered up until the tip. First and foremost, let's get into the injury report tonight because it's kind of a bittersweet one. We gained somebody, but unfortunately, we lose two bodies. Jalen Brown has been activated for tonight. He missed 3 out of the 4 preseason games due to COVID-19. He was questionable up until this afternoon. He said, "I feel awesome, to be honest with you today," in the shoot-around interviews. And then you look at the other side of the injury report. You see Al Horford, who missed half the preseason games. Last update, he was home in isolation, asymptomatic, which is, kind of a little bit of a good news. But at the same time, he is not here tonight in New York. And Josh Richardson, we're going to talk about him. A late scratch, a migraine, a headache keeps him out just 2 hours before tip-off. Guys, it feels like we can't catch a break, and this is only game 1 out of 82. How do we feel?
It's rough, especially with the Josh Richardson news. I get it. Migraines can be rough. I don't know. I know people have chronic migraines and whatnot, but definitely is a kind of a mood killer for sure. Especially with a guy like Josh Richardson, who's out of the lineup, and our whole thing this offseason has been how deep our team got, and Horford and Richardson were kind of the 2 key reasons to the depth. So it kind of sucks seeing our depth really not active for the season opener.
Yeah, it's really disappointing. I was really excited to see Josh Richardson actually play in a regular season game. He looked pretty good when we saw him at the Garden in the first game. So I don't know. It's kind of disappointing, but at the same time, migraines can be pretty bad sometimes. So it must have been he must have been really going through it if it meant he couldn't play tonight.
Uh-oh.
Oh, Lord.
We can't hear you. Wait, you're just muted. We can't hear you. You're just muted.
You're just muted.
You just got to turn on the mic.
How about now?
All right.
Okay, we're good. Perfect. Now. So, Seamus, how do we feel? How do we feel about this?
So, dang, I'm just sitting here talking like no one can hear me. But anyway, every time I think of a migraine story, I always think of the Terrell Davis story, old running back for the Denver Broncos, 2-time Super Bowl champ. And he claims he couldn't see under a migraine. I've never had a migraine in my life, but I know they're pretty bad. And Josh Richardson tonight, not too, concerned about him being out. Same with Horford. COVID, hopefully he's getting over COVID, and apparently he is. Those are 2 minor injuries, so we're not exactly where we were last season in terms of injuries. We're not dealing with a sore knee, unless we count in Robert Williams, or an ankle issue or whatever. So that does give me some optimism moving forward, but it sucks tonight that we don't get to see our depth. The only thing that does make me feel better, though, is the Knicks will be without Taj Gibson and Nerlens Noel. And that kind of equals out the playing field a bit. So you got to feel better about that. But overall, it sucks to see our depth out.
That's funny you mentioned that, Seamus, because the Knicks are clearly high on these 2 guys, Taj Gibson as well as Nerlens Noel, bringing them both back to the team this year. Seamus, what does this do for the Knicks in sort of matchup-wise? Those are 2 pretty big centers in their rotation. Obviously, they have high hopes for them, hence why they brought them back. What does this do to New York?
New York has to go super small tonight. Usually the Celtics, if you look at their lineups in the past, they haven't been the biggest team, yet you look at their lineup tonight against the Knicks are missing their top 2 big guys. They clearly have the size advantage despite Horford being out. I would like to see a little bit more pick and roll ran for Robert Williams, and just more plays in general ran for Robert Williams. I know I expressed concern with how they were using him in the preseason, but ultimately that was only 3 games. So moving into the season, I would like to see them utilize Robert Williams a little bit more. And I think the perfect opportunity is tonight because, who's guarding him out there for the Knicks?
Yeah. And Ian, you had mentioned before the game, before the show in the group chat that, we don't really have to rely on guys like a Pritchard or a Nesmith anymore now with the depth. But tonight, unfortunately, two out of the guys that we got over the offseason are out. How much confidence do you have in Romeo Langford and Aaron Nesmith and Pritchard from what you've seen out of those 4 games in the preseason?
Honestly, I'm a lot higher on Nesmith and more so Romeo Langford after watching what they did in the preseason. And we saw Nesmith last year. He looked pretty good in his rookie season, and now he's had a preseason. So now he's been able to get into a routine. Langford looked great, and if he can stay healthy, I feel like him and Nesmith off the bench is going to be insanely dangerous. Also, I guess we can't be too mad that it's Langford and Nesmith because last year it would have been Tremont Waters and Carson Edwards starting.
Well, that's a great point. Again, that just goes along to show you how this depth and how this team is really constructed. Rob, you have talked about Romeo and Nesmith, how equally great they both played in the preseason. Some say Nesmith had the ledge. Some had said, Romeo had it. What does this do, for those two who are going to get the spotlight tonight with Josh Richardson being out? Who do you see performing better, maybe? I can't think of a better word out of those two tonight. Who are you looking to perform better out of those two?
I think it's kind of tough to say, but the two of them, I think this season we got to expect kind of a Swiss Army knife type of duo. I think it's going to be a different one of the two every game. I think tonight's matchup presents a good one for Langford with Barrett being out there, and Brown Udoka did say Brown will be playing shorter stints, so we're going to be seeing a good amount of the two of them. But I think Romeo. I've been very high on Romeo Langford all preseason now, and I think you're really going to start to see Romeo Langford kind of open up this game, and I think you're going to see a big night out of him. I'm expecting 10 plus from him. I'm expecting some good defense, and I think Langford's the man to watch tonight.
Now, somebody who's not listed on the injury report, but he is injured, is Peyton Pritchard, the guy with the jersey right behind me. Now, Peyton Pritchard, if you guys don't know, he did break his nose. He missed the last couple preseason games. He said the readjustment did not hurt. The breaking itself did not hurt. He has now have a clear face mask on. How does this affect Peyton Pritchard's game? We've seen him go through a couple days of practice. So far so good. This is what we heard. We haven't really seen anything yet. What do we expect to see tonight from Peyton Pritchard? How does he adjust with this face mask on?
Well, I can speak from personal experience of wearing a face mask in a game. It sucks, okay? Like, you cannot see the floor whatsoever. You can't see the basket when you're shooting. You really can't see anything. Now, I think the NBA has improved that a little bit over time, as we saw with Kyrie. He hated the mask early on, but he got the nose shaved in so he could see the court. Mm-hmm. I wonder if that's going to be the same issue, the same, development with Pritchard and his mask. But playing with a mask and also playing with I don't know how broken his nose was, but not being able to breathe through your nose is a problem out there as well. That might affect him a bit. I could see him playing a little bit less tonight, but I do like the matchup for Pritchard considering the Knicks have Kemba. We saw Kemba get ran off the floor a million times last year because of his defensive mishaps and his physical size overall. If Pritchard, he's a small guard himself who, has defensive questions. You can throw out a guy like Pritchard against Kemba tonight and feel pretty comfortable about it because of Pritchard's ability to score on the offensive end of the floor. I don't know if he'll play a ton tonight, but I do like the matchup for Pritchard.
Now, speaking of matchups, we do have our key matchup tonight, which is Jason Tatum and Julius Randle. But before we get to the main key matchup, Seamus, you had mentioned yesterday that something to look forward to is even though Dennis Schroeder might not be in the starting role tonight, watch for him off the bench in that matchup with Kemba Walker.
Oh, definitely. You look at our whole lineup as in its entirety. Who do you trust with the ball in your hands or with the ball in their hands? Marcus Smart, or Dennis Schroeder? I personally I love Smart. I think he's a great player, certainly a high level defensive player, elite level defensive player, but his offensive game is highly questionable. And looking at Schroeder's overall resume, he was almost sixth man 2 years ago. He had a decently underrated season with the Lakers last year. And, in the preseason, we saw what his, skill set holds. And I wouldn't be surprised if Schroeder does become the sixth man, but ultimately plays starter minutes. And we'll get a glimpse of that tonight. But also moving forward, I wouldn't be surprised if we see that development.
Now, Rob, obviously a guy who we've been looking forward to, see play is out, Josh Richardson. But what would that matchup look like between Fournier and Richardson? I mean, we kind of mentioned this when we first got Richardson, where it's like, okay, well, maybe this is Fournier's replacement, where Richardson can play both offense and defense. Whereas if his offensive game wasn't working last year, we weren't really getting that much production because he's not much of a defensive player. I know we're trying not to live in a fantasy world, but tell me what that matchup could have looked like. Who do you think favors that matchup?
It's tough to say. I think it really depends on how Fournier's going to play. Evan Fournier is a guy who can explode for 25, 30 points if he's on. And, although we never really saw that in Boston, we saw glimpses of that. He had a couple of decent games for us. He can get it going. And, we don't really see that with Richardson. Richardson's kind of a guy that's going to get you a consistent 10 to 20, maybe 15 points. He's going to always be there on the defensive side of the ball. So, I think the matchup goes in favor of whether or not Fournier is on. Richardson prevents a really tough defensive matchup. He's not someone who anyone in the league really wants to go up against on any night. So, I'd like to say Josh Richardson would win that matchup just based off of his defensive ability.
Now, going to the key matchup of the night, Ian, it's Jason Tatum and Julius Randle. Tell me what you're looking for, because this matchup for Jason Tatum, Julius Randle is also he's a little bit older than Tatum, obviously, but he's somewhat of an up-and-coming center in the Eastern Conference, or a power forward, if you will. Tell me what you're looking for tonight. Tatum, 26, 4 and 7 last year. Randle right behind him. Actually, maybe even right in front of him, 24, 10 and 6. Tell me what you're looking for tonight.
Yeah, I mean, Randle had a spectacular season last year, and he was well-deserved of the all-star spot that he got. And, this is going to be just like any other all-star kind of matchup. It might be an underrated matchup, because when you think Julius Randle, you don't automatically think of, a star. But, he kind of made himself into one playing for the Knicks last year. He's really good defensively. So if he's going to be on Tatum the entire game, it's going to depend. I guess it's going to depend on what Tatum's going to shoot like, because we know Tatum, sometimes he can have games where he's going to drop 60, and then he's going to have games where he drops 8 points on one of 18 shooting. So I think it all depends on if Tatum can get hot quickly, to start the game. If he can hit his first few shots, I have a feeling that it's going to be a good game for Tatum. And same thing with Randle. He's pretty much the same way.
Now go ahead.
Sorry. All right,
no,
something I want to chime in here. Last postseason was that he really favors his left hand.
Seamus moment.
As much as, can you not hear me?
No, you cut out hardcore, and the whole point. Re-say your point, because the whole point you're trying to make was cut out.
So something that got exposed last offseason with Julius Randle, and I think we really got to take advantage of tonight, is he doesn't really use his right hand. He's a left-handed shooter, so he really favors his left side of the ball to a point where if you could take that away, he's going to have a bad game. So, whoever's guarding him, whether it's Tatum, Brown, Williams, either or, Grant Williams or Rob Williams, whoever is assigned onto him, I think you really got to take away that left hand and get Randle uncomfortable, which is pretty easy to do from what I've seen.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on this matchup, Seamus?
This is the dream matchup to start the season. I mean, we've seen all the photos of Jason Tatum over the offseason lifting, gaining muscle, and this is the perfect matchup to prove it in. Julius Randle, I mean, you look at him, he is a legit power forward. He's a solid power forward, and he can even go and play center. I wouldn't say, Tatum can reach those heights, but Tatum this summer, I mean, if he really is 6'10" and he really did put on all this weight and this mass on his body and muscle, I mean, this could be the ultimate just going at each other all night, totally physical, just one-on-one. It could turn into one of those. I could see this usually happens with guards, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it later in the game with these two guys, how competitive both of them are. Just go at each other for a stretch and just entertain and explode the Garden, really, because, I mean, MSG is going to be popping tonight. And we all know, I posted that stat before the game, the Celtics own both Gardens.
now, now, Rob, you had mentioned to me yesterday an underrated key matchup to look out for tonight would have something to do with maybe a Marcus Smart or a Jalen Brown versus an RJ Barrett. What do you see in that type of matchup ahead of tonight?
Yeah, well, listen, RJ Barrett, he's a rising star in the making. He's entering his third year. Last season, he was, really, I would say, exceeded expectations for sure. He's really become a great spot-up sharpshooter. He's starting to develop that off the dribble and attack the basket. He's 6'7". He's long. He's tall. He's a tough matchup. So, I think that's something that coming into this game, I'd assign Marcus Smart onto a guy like, RJ Barrett. I think you're going to see Brown on him to start off, but he's a guy that if he gets going, he could give you 30 and you look up and you're down by 15 because, Barrett's a flamethrower.
Yeah. Now, kind of before we get into the keys of the game, this kind of ties into, leads a nice soft lead into that segment. But, how do the Celtics approach the New York Knicks maybe differently from last year, where they didn't really have that much perimeter shooting, like they did last year, like they do this year with it, bringing guys like Fournier and who is it, Kemba, and obviously guys like Rob said, like an RJ Barrett who can light it up. How do they approach the Knicks differently this year?
Yeah, it is really going to be different because I don't know if you guys remember, at least I remember from the last time we played the Knicks last season. I don't remember a time where we were like really healthy when we played them. And so they just completely dominated us in the paint because they were just able to get every single rebound. Now, I feel like they'll be a lot more comfortable trying to defend the Knicks now because a lot of these guys are pretty good perimeter defenders. You got Marcus Smart, you got Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum, he can defend on the perimeter. You got Dennis Schroeder off the bench now. I'm a lot more excited to see how we try and stop this team because, it's probably going to set a precedent for what we do going forward or what we hope to see going forward throughout the rest of the season.
Now let's reverse card this, Seamus. And what are the Knicks going to do differently that we see this year against the Celtics? Because the Celtics are ultimately new coaching staff, more of a defensive-minded coaching staff to kind of match Tom Thibodeau's coaching staff. And then as well as you got guys like, unfortunately, Al Horford and Richardson aren't here tonight, but guys like Schroeder, Hernan Gomez, obviously we've seen a leap in each of Pritchard's and Neesmith's and Langford's game. So what might the Knicks do differently this year than they did last year against us?
Definitely space the floor. If you look at last year's matchups, like Ian said, they totally dominated us in the paint. And when someone's dominating in the paint that hard to the extent of, what we saw last season against the Celtics, 3-point shooting becomes, almost a non-factor in a sense because, both teams shoot threes. And this season, they added guys like Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier. And those guys are going to bring a huge presence to the outside because not only can those guys play make, as we saw last season, but they're pure scorers as well. They can score on, mostly anyone, relatively their size. And that's just going to bring a whole new mix to this Knicks team is the fact that they have a backcourt that can now play make and score on their own. I didn't really see that last year. They were starting Elfrid Payton in the playoffs, and they eventually went and benched him. So that's a huge upgrade in my mind. So tonight we're going to be looking at their backcourt and just their ability to space the floor.
Well, Justin, something I just want to throw out there is I've noticed we've been talking about matchups and, what are the key ones. And, something I don't think we're looking enough into is this off the bench Dennis Schroeder versus Derrick Rose matchup. Rose throughout the preseason now and last postseason, if you guys remember, he's been their go-to scorer. I mean, against the Hawks, he was their guy. He was averaging right around 20 points per game. So I don't think we should underlook Derrick Rose coming off the bench. I mean, we really need our bench when they're out there to play some solid defense.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And he had a hell of a preseason as well. That's a good point.
Definitely. These two are going to be fighting for the Sixth Man of the Year race, I have a feeling, like all year. It's going to end up being like Derrick Rose, Jordan Clarkson, Dennis Schroeder, and maybe Tyler Hero with Miami. So, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see what these guys do.
Seamus
God,
giggled at the
Tyler
Hero mention.
I don't know. I was too busy researching about like what people were predicting, and people were predicting Tyler Hero. So I'm like, all right, I might as well throw it in.
He's a fair Sixth Man of the Year candidate, but like people are trying to make him out to be an all-star and potential. He says he wants to be on the Trae Young and Luka level. Like, I don't know.
Now, not to get too off topic.
We can't get
but,
too off topic.
But
opponents.
Can Dennis Schroeder, if he stays healthy and he can be consistent, can he be a Sixth Man of the Year candidate this year?
I think it depends. We got to see what Ime Udoka's offense consists of. Boston's got a lot of mouths to feed. You got Tatum, you got Brown, you got Smart, Horford and Richardson. And, I mean, with the way that Nesmith and Langford have been playing, they're going to have the ball in their hands a good amount too. So, yeah, I think it really depends on what type of offense we've seen. When Schroeder was a candidate back in 2019, I believe, with the Thunder, he kind of had that ability to come off the bench and kind of run the show. We haven't seen whether or not he's going to get that ability yet. If I had to guess, I hope and think he will. And if he does, I think you could see him in the top 3 candidates for sure.
All right. We're going to have to get back on topic because that could literally be a whole podcast segment right there talking about a Sixth Man of the Year candidate. That brings us into the Celtics Talk Weekly's 3 keys to the game. Yes, it's returning from last year's pregame show. We'll start off with Rob. What is one of your keys to the game tonight against the New York Knicks?
My keys to the game kind of plays along with Seamus, but it's don't allow second chance points. The Knicks are now without Taj Gibson and Nerlens Noel, who are 2 guys that are physical and can rebound the basketball. However, they got Mitchell Robinson back, who they didn't have all last season, so he's in the lineup tonight. And don't forget, Julius Randle averaged near 11 rebounds. So the Boston Celtics without Al Horford, you got to expect them to crash the glass and do not allow second chance points. Hold them to 1 shot of possession.
Ian, what's your key to the game?
All right, so my key to the game is next man up. We said earlier, and we've been talking about it all offseason. We've been talking about this depth that this team has now. And now that we have guys, we have Al Horford out, we have Josh Richardson out, and we have Jalen Brown returning from COVID. I mean, this is going to be the perfect next man up scenario to test what this depth actually looks like on this team.
And Seamus?
My key to the game is play a physical, full energy game for 48 minutes. Look, I already said it. MSG is going to be wild tonight. And the Knicks, they're already a physical team under Tom Thibodeau, but now they have extra motivation in the locker room with Evan Fournier and Kemba Walker. Those 2 guys, I cannot imagine I'm sure they like their Celtics teammates, but they don't like the Celtics logo or organization, right? And we've seen their impact in the locker room, more specifically Kemba's impact in the locker room. If they can get guys behind them tonight, I mean, they're going to go all out tonight. I can see the Knicks I could see a segment in the third quarter where the Celtics are waning a bit, and then, Kemba dives for a loose ball or something and hypes up the crowd, and then, we're sitting back and going, yikes. That could happen. But if the Celtics bring their A game for the full 48 minutes and match their physicality, we're going to weather the storm. We have more talent. We should win this game. But the emotional factor and us being on the road and injuries, obviously, play a huge part in who's going to win or lose this game. And the Celtics just need to play the entire game.
You know what my key to the game is? If I could just make one overarching thing and kind of I'm going to bring this back, Justin, from last year. Remember my bold takes, as I have a voice crack. A bold take for tonight.
You didn't have to mention it.
A bold take, however. I know that was rough. I couldn't not. But I think Jason Tatum is going to have an absolute just explosion offensive game. I think, he finished last season essentially the league's best scorer. We saw him put up 40 in twice on Brooklyn. He put up a 50 bomb on Brooklyn. He put up 50 in the play-in game to play Brooklyn. So, if I had to guess, I think Jason Tatum goes to around 35, 40 points tonight. I don't think there's anyone on the New York Knicks who can truly guard that man.
Rob, one quick question. Your boy Grant Williams finally getting the start. I know we've been memeing it this entire offseason, even
no,
going
not
into
we.
now.
He.
No, not
but
he,
now
because
that
you
he's
guys,
finally started.
You guys love to. All right, so here's my thing on
now
Grant.
that he's
I'd like to
finally
bring him
starting,
up.
how
Yes,
are you feeling about it?
I like to bring him up,
So,
but I have confidence
here's
in him.
my
I
opinion.
ordered a Grant Williams jersey.
All right, that's a waste of your money. But here we go.
All right, Rob, what do you think? What do you think about it?
All right, so all jokes aside, it's interesting to see because listen, Grant Williams did have a solid preseason. I think he showed flashes of him actually playing a great fast-paced style of basketball. We kind of haven't seen him play. He got out in transition really well. He did get some stops on the defensive end. I do think Grant Williams is at his best when the ball's not in his hands unless he's going up with the shot. I think he's clumsy with the ball. He doesn't really have a great handle. He's got a decent post game. But listen, if Grant Williams can give us 25 minutes of solid defense and great spacing, I'll have no problem with him stepping on the basketball court. It's just when offense is going dry and the Celtics can't seem to get a bucket, and the ball gets swung to Grant Williams and he thinks, oh, it's my time to go, to get the offensive flowing. No, that's not your role, Grant. Your role is to get a stop on the defensive side of the ball, and that's how you make your impact.
Seamus seems to.
I just knew we had to bring it up.
Seamus, I'm gonna let you say something because we are getting close to the tip, but you seem to love that little response from Rob. So what's your follow up to that?
Well, see, I think my perception of Grant Williams is exactly that. It's like if the Celtics are in a moment in a dry spell per se, Grant Williams is literally the worst player to have out on the floor because he thinks in that moment he's like, all right, I'm Tatum. All right, here we go. And
sidestep.
I just don't understand. He takes Tatum-esque shots. He takes hurry shots. He'll take step back shots in these dry spells, and it's like, what are you doing? And I just think, if the Celtics, he's almost like that quarterback. We think of like a Baker Mayfield, where if he has the lead, he's really good on script. But if he has to come back or generate points down the stretch, it's a little shaky. Same thing with Grant Williams. It's like if we have control of the game and he can give us solid minutes, he's a solid young big. But in those moments of us just needing a bucket or us needing a defensive stop, Grant Williams, he just tries to do too much.
Now, win or loss in the postgame show, I do want to talk about this, so we won't go too into depth of this. But if you Celtics fans at home watching don't know, the Celtics waived Jabari Parker, then a couple days, waivers cleared, re-signed him to a better contract. So he is back with the Celtics. Guys, what do we think really quick? Because we are just a couple moments away from tip-off. What do we think? Now, remember, we will touch on this later on in the post-game show tonight, but what do we think about that signing for Brad Stevens and Jabari Parker?
I like Jabari. I think he's got a good amount of vet experience. I think, in games where in this situation where Al Horford and, Josh Richardson are, I think Jabari's a great option. I think there's a solid chance you could see him sneak into that backup 4 role over Juancho Hernan-Gomez. I think there's always that opportunity. So, I personally was upset when he got released, so I'm happy to see him back.
Yeah, I think he had a good preseason, Justin. I know you're really high on him. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty excited that he's back.
Well, that concludes Celtics pregame live. Again, I'm Justin Lowe. That's Seamus. That's Ian. That's Rob. We're getting you guys set for Celtics and Knicks season opener, 7:30 p.m. at Madison Square Garden. You can catch the game on ESPN. Come right back here, the Celtics Talk Weekly YouTube. Subscribe if you haven't. We will have you post-game coverage. Win, loss, tie, triple overtime, Grant Williams game winner shot. It doesn't matter. We got you covered right after the game, moments after the final buzzer. Again, I'm Justin. That's Rob. That's Ian. That's Seamus. We will see you Celtics post-game live.